Today's video is outside, obviously. I wanted to take advantage of the beautiful weather that I'm having here, and it's a pretty setting. You might be able to see some butterflies on the butterfly bush, perhaps. Hopefully you will at some point. Today I'm going to give you an introduction to an essay. He went through different ideas about the history of the freedom of expression. How did people used to view it? How has it evolved over the centuries? And today is just the introduction, then we'll delve more deeply into it later. The title of his essay is Writing the Balance, an inquiry into the foundations and limits of freedom of expression. And by freedom of expression, referring to freedom of speech types of things. So first of all, I'm going to read the First Amendment so that you know exactly what we're talking about. It's short. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, the essay does not focus in on all of what I just read. It only focuses in on the freedom of expression part, not the rights of the people to assemble or to petition the government. And the first thing that I want to stress is, why are we even concerned about freedom of expression in the First Amendment to begin with? Why is this important? Hayman said, "Those who advocate regulation of a particular form of expression contend that it causes substantial harm to individuals, groups, or the community at large." So he says people who want regulation of speech, of what's published, are the people that's saying this right is causing harm to somebody or different groups of people. People can take the idea that something is harmful and then use that idea of harm being caused to push for more and more restrictions on whatever freedom that they're talking about. And you should ask yourself, are those people correct or are they not, and why? And could they be both correct and incorrect at the same time, perhaps? Maybe it's a very nuanced thing. So first of all, when is regulation of a right advisable? When should it be used? When should it not be used? And the authors contended that we want a view that combines both the justifications and the limits of the freedom into a coherent whole. He says that freedom of speech is a right, but it's limited by the fundamental rights of other people and the community as a whole. So I have the right to express myself, you have the right to express yourself, but that right, according to him, has limits. The rights of other people and the community at large are also in play. First of all, let's take a snapshot look at the 1700s in America. What did freedom of expression look like then? They thought freedom of speech was from what they called natural rights, inherent in our human nature and in the fact that we're citizens, but bounded by the rights of others. You may not infringe on other people's freedoms. And that the government is to protect our rights, so it should protect our liberty of speech, but make sure it doesn't violate other rights, because we also have other rights: the right to life, the right to print things, the right to travel. Mentioned a moment ago the term natural rights. It's not a term we're familiar with today. It's a standard by which we can assess the legitimacy of laws regulating free speech. That was viewed that way back then, the 1700s. But later, a term called legal positivism and then utilitarianism arose, and those views did not support natural rights. I want to define for you legal positivism and utilitarianism. Both of these are from not the article I referenced earlier. I will put the source on the screen for you. Legal positivism is the thesis that the existence and content of law depends on social facts and not on its merits. The positivist thesis does not say that law's merits are unintelligible, unimportant, or peripheral to the philosophy of law. It says that they do not determine whether laws or legal system exist. The fact that a policy would be just, efficient, or prudent is never sufficient reason for thinking that it is actually the law. And the fact that it is unjust, unwise, inefficient, or imprudent is never sufficient reason for doubting it. So just because something seems like a stupid idea to somebody doesn't mean that that law is not a law. Or just because something seems like it would be a very good idea doesn't mean that a law exists for that. Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is generally held to be the view that the morally right action is the action that produces the most good. Now, this is a very interesting thing to think about, because who defines morals? Says the morally right action. Well, who defines morals? Where do we get that? Who gets to say who's right and who's wrong? Also, the action that produces the most good. Who decides what the most good is? How do they decide it? And how do you measure good? How do you measure how much good something is? And if it's most good or only a little good? And good for whom? This seems a very murky area to me. Who decides all these things, and how do you measure any of this? A modern day view of the First Amendment and freedom of expression is that First Amendment issues are not conflicts of the rights of individual people, but that they are clashes between free speech and social interests. So there's a shift there. Instead of person versus person, it can be person's free speech versus what social interest is at hand. Rights represent what it means to be a free person in various spheres of life. This is the author talking, not only in relation to the external world, but also in one's inner life and in its expression to others, in social relationships and community life, and in the intellectual and spiritual realm. So rights represent what it means to be a person in these different areas. He says there are 4 elements of liberty. There's the aspect of external freedom. There's essential for individual self-realization, that liberty is central to democratic self-government, and that it safeguards our search for truth. I found that one to be particularly interesting, that we can be, as human beings, constantly on the search for what is true, what is not true, and that liberty should protect our search for that truth. So this today was a brief overview of the history of the First Amendment, a brief look at some of the issues involving different theories about it. Later, each of these will be delved into more deeply.